I'm Jeanette Anders, and today is April 5th. I'm at the Life History Project, sponsored by the Chincoteague Library and Museum. Today I'm interviewing Anne and Bill Rodgers, who are residents here. Anne, would you tell us your name and where and when you were born?
Anne Talbert Rodgers. I was born on Chincoteague, September the 30th, 1939. I was born on Jester Street and in my grandmother's house.
My name is William H. Rodgers, Jr., Bill Rodgers. I was born October 18th, 1938 in my grandmother's house on Main Street. My grandmother Tatum.
Can you tell us about your parents and your grandparents, what their names were? And
my father was William Howard Rodgers Sr., and my mother was Nellie Elizabeth Tatum. And both of my mother and father were from Chincoteague. And my father's father was John Rodgers, and his mother was Mary Rodgers. And John Rodgers was born in North Carolina, and he came to Chincoteague as a boy. My mother's parents were John Tatum and Lottie Booth Tatum. And they lived on, they were both born on Chincoteague, and they lived on North Main Street.
Thank you, Bill. Anne, would you tell us a little bit about your family history, your parents, your grandparents?
My father was Roy Chandler Talbert. My mother was Alma Catherine Jester. She hated the name Alma, so she always went by Catherine. My grandparents were Daniel James Wilton Jester. Wow, that's a long string. And my grandmother was Mary Maria Johnson.
And they were born here as well?
They were both born here on the island. All of them were on the island. My grandmother, her father, was born in Norway. And he came here, he was shipwrecked. And he washed ashore on Assateague and came to Chincoteague, and he never left.
Is that the story of the child?
Yeah.
No, not James alone.
No, it's not that.
Good.
This is another shipwreck. One uncle of mine made the story that he said the thing was he was the ship's cook, and the crew didn't like his cooking, so they put him in a barrel and threw him overboard.
Do you think that was true?
I don't think so. My father's parents were Alan Talbert, and his mother was golly day, Annie, how can I forget that? Annie Chandler. And they were both born on the island. And the Chandler goes back to the Chandler at the turntable, Captain Chandler, that most everyone around here is quite familiar with.
What is it?
Captain Chandler, it's a lone grave up at what we always called the turntable. I don't know what y'all call it now.
The north end of the island.
At the north end of the island.
And there's a grave there?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me.
A single grave.
One single grave. And he was killed the story is he was struck by lightning out in his boat and was electrocuted. So.
But he was married?
Oh, yeah.
And his wife's grave is not there?
No. I think probably she went back to Delaware.
I'd like to hear something about your growing up on this island.
Growing up?
Yeah, like what you did for fun, how school was, how you met this lovely lady.
Well, this lovely lady, our fathers used to play golf together.
Wow.
And they would take us and put us in the playground at the golf course, and we played at the playground when we were kids in diapers. And they played golf and left us there, so that's how we met. And we started school together, and we were in every grade together from first grade through 12th grade. And then after we graduated in 1957, graduated in June We were married in August of the same year.
I see behind you that there's a Carnival Queen, 1957, which is why you're sitting here.
Yeah.
Would you tell us about that?
Well, every year the Kiwanis Club would put on a fashion show. And from the fashion show, anyone who wanted to participate could become a contestant in the Miss Chincoteague contest. So most of the young girls would participate in it. And I was chosen as 3 finalists. And then out of the 3 finalists, they had another contest on the opening night of the carnival. And they had judges, and they got people from the Navy base, captains and all kinds of people from there. And they were the judges. So we had swimsuits and we had gowns we had to wear. And then they picked one out of the 3, and I was the lucky one that night.
And you were the lucky one.
Oh, yes, yes.
You got married a month after you graduated from high school.
2 months. Yeah.
2 months. Yeah. So I guess the Navy base had a big impact on your life here.
Well, it was a negative impact because when the Navy base left, there were no jobs except on the water, being a waterman, oysters and clams and oysters, what have you. So I went to college, and it took me 7 years to get a master's degree in geology, but we did it together. She worked and I studied.
And he worked.
And I had just about any kind of job you could think of in Charlottesville.
And where did you travel as a geologist?
As a geologist, after graduating, first of all, we moved from Charlottesville to New Orleans, and we stayed in New Orleans 5 years. And then we got transferred to Trinidad in the West Indies, and we loved it. So we stayed in the West Indies for 10 years. And after the exploration program was over in Trinidad, we moved to Miami, Florida. And then from Florida, we moved to Texas, and 2 different cities in Texas. And then when we retired, we moved back to the Eastern Shore.
That's quite something.
And here we are.
I kind of interrupted. You started to say you did a lot of different things in Charlottesville.
A lot of different things, jobs, yes. Yes. I was motel clerk. I did furniture refinishing. I worked for professors. I was a librarian. I worked at Alderman Library, and I worked at the Geology Library.
Worked with Frank, building.
And summertime, I worked with the construction companies. First summer, I came back here and worked for Wild Maddox. That's where I worked in high school every summer, driving a cement mixer.
Cement mixer.
15 years old driving a cement mixer. That's when you could get your license, when you were 15. So in order to get when I went to get my license, I said, I might as well get a chauffeur's license. So I got a chauffeur's license so I could drive trucks. Got through high school driving a truck.
And when you were in Charlottesville, you also worked as a chauffeur one night, and Jim Brackens asked you, what can't you do?
Yeah, since I had my chauffeur's license, I could also act as a chauffeur at the hotel. So.
And what did you do all that time while he was in school?
Well, I took care of 2 children, and I worked at the telephone company for a while as a telephone operator. That was when you had to go through the operator to make almost any kind of call. And then after that, I worked at State Farm Insurance as a clerk, just filing. And then after our second child was born, I just took care of other people's children at home, because it was cheaper than hiring somebody to take care of 2 of mine and then trying to work.
It must have been hard, though, leaving this island where all your family history was.
No, that wasn't hard.
We both were ready to go.
It was getting out in the world. No, it wasn't hard.
But you came back.
Well,
Oh, yeah. Once you've done what you want to do, then you come back.
we didn't find anything better.
Oh. What did you expect when you returned?
What did I expect when I returned? Well, I still had a brother living here, and she has a brother living here, and we just came back and we're a family again.
Is the place any different?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me,
No.
tell me about it.
Tremendously different.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, boy. I don't know if they want me to or not. No, when we left, there was nothing here but the Russell Hotel and the Channel Bass Inn. The Russell Hotel was in town where Bill's Restaurant is now. And Channel Bass Inn, of course, is right there on Church Street. It's still here. So that was the only.
There were no motels, no hotels, other than those two.
And some people had tourist homes, they called them. They didn't call them bed and breakfast, they called them tourist homes. And some people would stay in those. But, so that's one thing that was a big difference.
How did people get here? So this was already a tourist area.
Yes.
Well, the tourists, mainly the tourists, they came to go fishing. People went deep sea fishing, and there was a large fleet of deep sea fishermen that acted as guides to take people fishing offshore.
And hunting.
And duck hunting in the wintertime. So that was a big business, and we didn't call them tourists. They were fishermen and hunters.
They called them sports.
Sports.
The sports were coming.
Sports are coming for the winter.
Yeah, and they stayed in the tourist homes.
And I know my uncle, Dutchy Jester, he had a big business with fishing, taking out charters. And he had rooms built upstairs in his home where these sports would stay. And they gave them room and board as well as taking them out on the boats. That was in the early days.
So when they went on the boats, it was a one-day trip?
Yes, yeah.
How many days they wanted to book.
But they would go just one day. They would go
they'd
out and come back and go
back.
out and come back. Yes,
Right.
one day.
And when they came to the island, how did they come to the island, the sports?
How did they come?
In
Yeah.
cars.
But there was a bridge?
Well, the
Yes, sir.
bridge has been there since 1923, so we don't know anything
Before
previous to that.
No, I really don't know much about it.
But there's a different bridge there now.
Yes.
Why was that built?
The one that's there now,
Yeah, the big one.
that's just been in the last few years.
I don't understand the question.
The bridge that
When
is
I-
there now.
When I came here, I had to come this long, big bridge to get here.
Right.
When was that built?
No, but 5 years ago.
It seems like an awfully big bridge for a little bitty island.
Well, you got to get here.
Yeah.
But
It took the place of two bridges, didn't it?
there were two bridges going there, where the road turns. If you go straight, you see where the old bridge, and right in the middle of town, right across from the theater.
I heard there was a flood.
In '62.
Can you tell me about that?
That's when
We weren't living here.
that's when we were in Charlottesville, and that's when she was a telephone operator. And tell them about trying to get in touch with your parent.
I had a friend call me that morning, and they said, I've just heard on the news that there's a flood at Chincoteague, and all the houses are underwater. And I said, oh, you got to be kidding, And she said, no, that's what they're saying. I said, well, I'll see if I can get a call through. So I tried calling home, and of course there was no answer. And so I called around to the radio station. I thought, well, maybe somebody at the radio station can tell me something. And they didn't know anything. I mean, you've got to remember, this was the days before cell phones and computers, and all this information didn't travel quite as fast as it does now. So finally, I called down at the telephone office and got one of my friends on the line, and I asked her if she would patch me through to a Nancock. So she connected me to the operator in a Nancock, which was the closest one to Chincoteague at that time. And I talked to the girls down there, And they confirmed that, yes, there was a flood at Chincoteague and that the only connection to the island was the sheriff's car. The sheriff had parked his car on a high point, and he was being in contact with the rest of the world by radio. And that was the only contact they had. So it took us about 3 days then to locate our parents. We had no idea where they were. And I found mine finally with some relatives that I just called around anybody we knew to see who could be. And he finally found his. Red Cross helped us find your mom and dad?
Yeah. Yeah, they first went to the Navy base where they had shelters set up, and then they went to stay with friends until the island was clear of typhoid and whatever they were having problems with.
It must have taken a while.
It took a while before they let people back on the island.
But
They evacuated everyone from the island.
it was it was scary to not know where your family is. It's a hard thing to think about.
This has been very interesting. And I'm just wondering, through the mechanism of this tape, if you could say something that you'd like to have recalled 100 years from now about your time here, your experiences here. If you had to leave a message for your great-grandchildren.
I would tell them that the 1950s was the best time in the world to grow up. And anybody that was lucky enough to grow up in the 50s, that you just don't know how wonderful it was. And the world needs to go back to more of that.
Tell us why.
That's what I think.
Yeah, tell us why, she says.
Why? Because you weren't fearful of everyone. You didn't have to be afraid every time you walked down the street. You didn't hear all of the violence and the drugs. And I mean, I know it was going on someplace in the world, but we never heard it. We didn't see any of that.
And everybody, in the summertime, everybody was on their front porch. And I played in the street. My neighbors, we all played in the street. We had children everywhere, all outdoors, playing in the street, roller skating, playing kick the can. And when it got dark, we went home to get supper.
Thank you so much. This was lovely.
Okay.
All right.
Good night.
So who is that again?
This is my great-grandfather.
And can you tell us a little bit about him?
Did you hear that story about him dying? She just...
Oh, we were just trying.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Do you want to? You can talk to us about your grandfather if you like.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like I said, he died having his tonsils removed, and I think he just choked to death because his throat swelled. Because it was all infected, and then they went ahead and tried to take him out. Well,
Is that one too, that he took the patrons of the jail in a wheelbarrow?
Yes.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Brought law and order.
yeah.
And he took drunks to jail in a wheelbarrow.
Yep. And the funny thing is, let's see if I get this right, his first wife died, and then he married your relative, Annie Holloway.
Holloway.
And so he has people, he has relatives of mine, and yet he's relatives of Bill. So it's kind of,
It's a small island.
it's a small island.